Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Afterthoughts. I'm so excited to actually be recording these. I will say it has taken me forever day to actually start. If you've been with me a while, then you know that Afterthoughts started as a newsletter. And I have had this newsletter for like 2 years or so. Afterthoughts, it's a safe space for us to have the conversations that we wish we would have had sooner. Today, I want to talk about a topic that some of you might be like, girl, why are you talking about this? It's all about ego, because I think ego gets a bad reputation. And I think the sooner we get a better understanding of how it shows up in our lives, but also introduce how it impacts us as entrepreneurs, as career-driven people, how that shows up in all the spaces. I don't know about you guys, but the first thing that comes to mind, I'm always thinking about Kanye's lyric in Beyonce's song. Ego comes across as somebody who is self-inflated, selfish, all about self, not really considering or thinking about other people. And yes, that can be true, but there are other forms of ego. I want you guys to think about ego as your trusted friend. Like my internal bestie, there are two well-documented types of ego. One is what we like to call the inflated ego. So this is the typical one that most people think about. This is the person who always thinks they're right, the person who may come across as arrogant, they come across very confident, like they know everything. That is what we call an inflated ego. Then we have what we call a deflated ego. So this is something where you're self-conscious. You're wondering, did I really do this right? So with those two forms of ego, they're both somewhat considered negative, right? They're both on two separate extremes. One is really low, where you're self-conscious. You're essentially not thinking that well of yourself. You come across as somebody with low self-esteem. And then you have the complete opposite, which is someone who's too arrogant, too self-assured, and probably needs to come down just a few notches, right? And so what I want to challenge us to think about when I say your trusted friend is finding that happy balance between those two types of ego. Because when you are operating at the far end of either one of those, it doesn't work to your benefit. You're either too much in your head thinking that something is not working for you, or you're jumping out there way too soon, haven't put in the hours to be the actual expert that you might think you are in your head. And really, you need to find that happy medium. If you're finding yourself where you're a little more self-conscious, or maybe you're finding yourself where it's like, girl, you really know that you don't know how to do that. And it's okay. It is totally okay if you don't really understand how to do something. But to portray yourself, that whole fake it till you make it mentality sometimes can work against you. The whole goal of having this trusted friend is helping you determine, okay, if I'm operating on one side of the spectrum, what can I do to find that balance between the two? Because when I find that balance between the two, not only am I operating in a space where I am balanced, but you're also operating from a place of authenticity and who you truly are, and not the representative, whether that's the one on the lower end or the higher end. One of my favorite kind of clips that went viral, it's been years, but there was this viral clip that went on with Zoe Saldana, and she was talking about how she loves who she's becoming. And in that, it's really just this self-assuredness that she portrayed, and that she was basically talking about how it doesn't matter what people say about her. She's very comfortable in her own skin. And that's what having a balanced ego does for you. It's basically like, yeah, I can hear the negative side of things, but I also am very aware of my highest version of self, and I'm choosing to find the balance between the two. And so with that, when we find that balance, we're essentially embracing what Dr. Carol Dweck, which if you're not familiar with, she talks a lot about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. I believe that when you're operating from your balanced ego, you are embracing this idea of a growth mindset, because essentially you're challenging yourself to constantly do better, be better, while not operating at one of the extremes. And so growth mindset says there's always an opportunity for me to be better, do better. right? When you're operating at the inflated ego or the deflated ego, you are in a fixed mindset, which means you're only thinking from that lens. You're very much operating in that box, which means you're not considering any other options or truths that could present themselves for you. And so with a growth mindset, you are making efforts to constantly be the best version of yourself. I believe that when we embrace ego as your trusted friend, as the person who's kind of waving the flag and saying, okay, you are being a little too humble this time. Maybe you should talk your shit. Maybe you should say like, yeah, I am a beast at that. Yeah, I am very good at that. Yes, I have put in 10 plus years and I am an expert. Or maybe it's saying like, yeah, you are the expert. However, there is opportunity for you to still grow. With that being said, I'd like to challenge you to start thinking about those moments when you're a little too self-conscious or maybe a little too arrogant. I think we all teeter from time to time, especially if you've been doing something for a long time or if you're doing something new. And that shows up for us as business owners, as entrepreneurs, or as corporate people. You know, you might enter a space that you have been doing forever. It feels like you could do the work in your sleep. And then you go to a different company and you realize they're doing it completely different. And now all of a sudden you're self-conscious. But that doesn't negate the fact that you actually have all those years of experience. It's finding that balance. And that's what I think as you see this is that you can operate on both sides of the spectrum by finding that balance and embracing a growth mindset. Thank you for being here. Those of you that are new, highly suggest you go over to the Afterthoughts newsletter. There are resources available, different articles, different books, other resources that you can use that might be helpful with you exploring these things. So with that, I will close out today and I look forward to seeing you guys at the next one.